Welcome, Erin. It's such a pleasure to see you today.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
And for the purposes of those who will be watching in at another time, I'm going to introduce you as Erin Rosales, and now Commissioner Emeritus of CCHI. We, of course, miss you tremendously as you step down this fall, 2022, from a 6-year commitment as CCHI Commissioner, something that the Commission itself believes in very strongly, so that we are constantly bringing on and have the benefit of new blood and new perspectives. And so that is certainly something that's written in to our mission on some level. Nonetheless, we are still very much missing you. I could speak for everybody, I'm sure. How are you feeling about that? And I'm sure this feels like a loaded question.
Well, specifically on that point, it kind of feels good to be missed. No, and the feeling is definitely mutual, but it hasn't really been that long. I do appreciate, honestly, the structure that CCHI has put together and making sure there are terms and having new people come in, because that's really what I'm thinking about, even as the time was coming to a close formally. You build community, you build connections, and there's still very, many ways to be involved in what the mission of CCHI is. But ultimately, what I'm feeling at this point is truly excitement to see. And this is what I was feeling even on the very last minute, meeting those last minutes of our virtual meeting together. What's on the horizon for CCHI, to know that when there is transition and handoff and succession planning is kind of I don't know, I want to say directly in my wheelhouse per se. It's not what I live and breathe, but I certainly do appreciate it. And to see how the commission will continue to grow and evolve and respond to what's going on in the world. We certainly did have a lot of opportunity in my tenure with CCHI to put our money where the mouth is as far as adjusting to world events. So I'm excited to see that continued growth with the new commissioners who are leading the way for CCHI. And really, I do feel this. I felt this when I was, actively serving on the commission, and now in this new role that I have formally off the commission, that it really is a community event. CCHI isn't doing anything in a vacuum or isolated from the professional world. So the dynamics have changed, the responsibilities have changed. So I can take a little bit of a breath in that regard. But the goal, the mission, the work, the purpose still remains the same.
Yeah, I mean, it is exciting in that sense, and getting to know these new commissioners on the board, on the commission, is of course always a wonderful, engaging opportunity to work together on moving things forward to the next level, as we are always striving to do. And then again, what happens sometimes, I think, when there's a commissioner who leaves, those who are left feel, wait, I didn't get to know that person as well as I would have loved to. And so you're a case in point, I must admit, Erin, for me, because we, number one, didn't actually ever meet in person. So there is that part of it. Our coming together and connecting has always been virtual. And so I don't have the benefit of thinking back on a time when we were in the same room, we walked across that room, we shook hands, and this is Erin, and wow, I am so pleased to meet you. So it makes me want to know more. And I hope in our conversation today, you feel that you could share a little bit about what makes for Erin Rosales now, but also what are you about in your past, in your journey, and from maybe not the beginning, but from a little ways back as well. And I'm all ears, and I hope that you feel comfortable enough sharing some things about you, Erin, with our audience.
Well, sure, sure. You know, I have the great pleasure of training, you know, people who are coming into the profession. And what your comment is just making me reflect on right now is the fact that so many of us coming into the profession of interpreting in general, healthcare interpreting specifically, that's where my focus has been professionally. We all have such a diverse background coming into the profession. And I don't just mean linguistically and culturally, that of course, yes, but even what our life journey has been in coming into the profession, you know, so so that's very interesting. We'll maybe have to reflect on on my reflections on that another time. But you know, my journey into healthcare interpreting really kind of then led into training and, you know, the professional involvement with certification. But it came about kind of because I needed a job. I hate to say, you know, I know some people have sought healthcare interpreting or interpreting in general as a career destination, a career path, and that wasn't the case for me. I didn't even know it existed, which is quite possibly why it didn't come onto the radar. But I had been living abroad in Honduras for about 3 years. And then this was after college, I came back to the United States and, you know, living with mom and dad because, you know, they have to put me up and I didn't have a place of my own yet. But long story short, I had the Spanish language skills and I needed to find some employment, and I saw an ad for a healthcare interpreter with the company. And so I applied and went through the interview process, and they hired me on. And that was kind of my journey into healthcare. But, you know, the funny thing is, healthcare interpreting specifically, if I look back, it was kind of all the pieces were coming together for that. You know, I'd studied Spanish and I loved the Spanish classes that I had in high school. I had a wonderful teacher. She taught it as an actual academic class, not as a fluff easy A. Sometimes the language classes can be approached in that way. But I had such a solid background that in foundation in the academic sense there, that I was able to continue studying. And so all of these pieces were kind of coming together with learning the Spanish language. And in addition to that, I also very much enjoyed engaging with others, having different aspects of serving others. And to be quite honest, I enjoyed performance. And you know, if you stop and think about that, what is interpreting if not a degree of performance? Now, of course, that's not all that interpreting is, but anyway, long story short, that's kind of, you know, I was able to see how the language skills, the performance skills, the connecting with others and doing something meaningful for others really collided and came together with interpreting. So that was my happenstance, which started out as needing to have a paycheck. A way of coming into the interpreting world, and it's been very rewarding and fulfilling. But, you know, as part of all of that journey then too, teaching has also kind of been part of the thread, part of the theme.
So when you say, okay, so I'm just going to take a step back here.
Jump in.
So just so that I know, when you say performance, so you were part of school plays, is that what you mean by that? Or you actually did other type of performances, like in front of your parents? Or
Yep, exactly.
Just wondering.
School plays, choral productions, forensics competitions, so solo serious acting and storytelling. Okay. So yeah, so had speech classes, you know, things along those lines. Were as an introvert, it's kind of weird, but there's kind of a dynamic in that. It's a different thing, you know, when you take on a different person, when you take on the expression of somebody else's thoughts and set your own thoughts aside. And that's basically, you know, what I was doing through those performances. was taking on somebody else's, perspectives and conveying that in an authentic way. Kind of sounds like interpreting.
Very much so. And it's wonderful to see, I've met more and more individuals who will say, I'm very much into performance and it's part of what I bring to the table as an interpreter. So it's interesting to have that thread. I also had a question about when you mentioned you went to Honduras and you were in living there and working there. Is that what you did after you graduated?
So I was there for a period of time. I was teaching in a bilingual school, high school, and speaking of teaching, I was teaching the literature and English classes. So all, just like you might expect for high school here in the United States, textbooks from the US, etc. Thank goodness for teachers' manuals.
Agreed. Yes.
So that's what I was doing for the majority of my time in Honduras.
And so that's, well, go ahead.
With no formal teaching degree, mind you, which again, and kind of making the parallels between the two professions, you certainly can. It had a lot of support at the school where I was teaching with regard to developing lesson plans and evaluations and that. But the truth is, there's always that takeaway of there's a reason why people get degrees in things like education. It's like, oh yes, this is, it's similar to interpreting, right? Oh yes, it's not just a matter of speaking two languages and being able to come into an environment and therefore I am an interpreter. Same thing with teaching. Oh yes, it's not just a matter of knowing something about science and going into a classroom and teaching science. There's so much more that's required to be able to really thrive and perform well and enjoy, honestly, that dynamic. So
and
so
is that's how you ended up when you came back and you started to interpret, that the teaching, when did that actually kick in a little bit more formally for you? Was that gradually, or at some point you decided to get formal training in teaching as well?
Formal, sure. So I'd done some classes and some self-study. Very much appreciate that, the resources that are available to answer the questions that you have on whatever it might happen to be. So that was certainly a part of it, but the really what kind of brought it all together was my time in preparing for and then earning a certification through the Association for Talent Development. They're an international organization based in the United States that basically focuses on what they'll call workplace learning and performance. So as opposed to training or studies, et cetera, in an academic setting, this focuses on the workplace setting. So they have a certification process. They have the exam, you sit for the exam, and then you have a work product that you submit to earn the certification. And back in the day when I did it originally it was the, let's see if I can remember, CPLP, Certified Professional in Learning and Performance. How was that for a mouthful?
Pretty good.
Yeah. They've repackaged that to Certified Professional in Training and Development. As language professionals, we can appreciate assessing what does this mean by what we're calling this thing. So so as part of that, the certification process has like the knowledge-based test, right? And then the work product that you will do, but it would basically test on 9 different domains of knowledge, somehow all centering in specifically a professional performance in a workplace setting. So just, managing organizational knowledge, evaluating instructional design, coaching, and, series of, don't test me on all those 9 off the cuff. If you gave me enough time, I'm sure I'd come up with them.
Well, I see you as a brilliant mentor to begin with. I mean, You know, I feel very comfortable. I mean, that's such a thing as that's where the trust building happens immediately, or it takes time, right? Depending upon the person. But I'm sure with this sort of training and development, the mentor mentee sort of engagement is probably central, I would say, or plays a very fundamental role in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that is so key, especially when we think about, well, I guess I'm having a hard time thinking about any professional role that doesn't involve some type of performance or engagement with some skills demonstration, right? And the relationship between new professionals, you know, professionals with many years under their belt in experience, that dynamic is really, in my experience, and maybe there's some bias in how I like to design and do things myself, but that performance aspect of how you're actually doing the job on the job is such a rich learning experience, you know, from a field performance and observing people, having debrief sessions after the fact, to be able to create, as you say, that dynamic of trust, to be able to really assess and honestly talk about how an interpreting session went on site, over the phone, etc. And, you know, what was really going on in your mind to make those decisions that you made. And being able to talk about the push-pull points, you know, I was thinking I could do that, but for this reason I decided to go this route, and, you know, how did that all turn out? Having those discussions with interpreters, even if it wasn't as a result of a field shadowing program, even if it's, you know, a debrief after the fact in some other context, really helps us to grow as individual practitioners, as individual professions, and therefore, you know, the entire profession as well. So I feel like I'm getting I'm chasing a shiny thing right now. So feel free to
Well,
chime in.
it's really interesting because I've experienced different ways that engaging in that debrief can go as well. And being super intuitive about how that person may perceive that part of the conversation is on the mentor in a way to discern the preparedness of the individual to even hear certain things if you're noticing certain things, or having them become aware of it obviously is the key. So it's a very nuanced dynamic. And so there are times when the slipperiness of it can be, whoa,
Yeah.
very, very poignant. And you always think, as the person who wants to help with the learning of self and self-understanding and awareness in performance, that is an incredibly nuanced aspect to all of this. And at times I wonder how much we really understand that level of nuanceness about it, so that we're always looking to improve and be better prepared for those kind of moments as well. So I don't know if you've experienced any that have gone super well, of course, but not so great, and you feel, ooh, I need to come back to that person and make sure that they understand.
Yeah.
The purpose, number one, is always about awareness and empowerment. I like to use that word because I do think that you know, that self-learning from one's own recognition of self is so key in this part.
Yeah. And I think, you know, something that's helped me is that idea of self-awareness, you know, and if something doesn't go well, I'll be chewing on it for the next 3 days, even though everybody else has moved on from it and didn't think it was that bad. So having that awareness in myself to recognize that other folks kind of have that wiring as well, certainly can be helpful. And having, conversations or debriefs, or I may be thinking I'm giving a feedback that is useful or helpful or going to be well received, and I didn't cue it up right, and then needing to, come back with an individual maybe at the same time or a different time, or kind of reframe things. Sometimes difficult conversations are going to be difficult conversations, and there's, just no way around that. But what I've learned with varying degrees of success, let me just frame it that way. Sometimes trial and error, right? Oops. But being honest and I don't know if this is maybe an overused term, but vulnerable oneself, to share, I can share this from my perspective because I've been there. These are mistakes that I've made along the way, and to let people know that, yes, you're seeing me perform at this particular level, or I have this feedback and I feel confident to be able to share this feedback, but let me tell you a little bit about the journey of how I got here, or how these, your other colleagues as well have gotten to the point that they have gotten. And certainly setting up the conversation or the debrief session, I learned to do that very early on. So even, before there's been an opportunity for shadowing of an experience, or, whatever that shadowing process is, setting the expectation that things might not always go well, and we'll talk about those things, so then it's not to suggest that, okay, well, then be careless in your performance. That's not the goal at all, but to at least, let people know that we will talk about things that maybe could have gone better. And almost inevitably, people tend to be harder on themselves than they wanted to be. So, so those are some of the things that I've learned along the way. It's just it is a two-way street. I might have a different perspective. I might have more experience to draw from when I'm assessing or evaluating from my perspective a situation. But I'm still learning, even from the newest people, the newest members of our professional community, who are learning the ropes, who are learning the skills.
And I have to say that in my mind, that's what makes it amazing. I mean, that is what continues to create that level of passion for me. That it's always a two-way, three-way, four-way, how many individuals street, and so yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, for you, when you think about how it evolved first, jumping in, leading the job, and obviously your formation in the language and performance, that certainly is what you drew upon it from the very beginning. This part of that led you into training and developing others and helping others to develop, I should say. Where do you think now, if you have to look back on that interwoven journey, you find there is what you think of yourself, Erin Rosales, as? Are you equally 50-50? I mean, let's bring some numbers into the picture here, just for the sake of making it a little bit more numeric for people who love percentages. But I'm just curious as to, it may have changed over time as well for you. So, obviously at the beginning, the full practitioner engagement, 100%. But then there was this other aspect. And so now you're, doing some of the other. So I'm curious to know, and maybe it went back in a loop for you. So you started and then it changed and you went back. So I'm curious, and was it because of particular things that you encountered at those segments or those moments in your journey? I'm just curious if you could give us a little idea about that part of it.
Okay,
Erin.
so full disclosure, I'm not a math person, but I'll be happy to toss out some numbers for the folks who like that. But what you were saying there, Zoe, is it hasn't, been a linear process, and I don't foresee it being a linear process even into the future, as far as, how much is dedicated to interpreting. I mean, obviously at first it was 100%, engaged in interpreting, and then training kind of worked its way in, and then interpreting kind of pulled back. But to fast forward to the present day, I'd say it's pretty close to 50-50% at this time. The time that I'm spending on things related to, and I'll just call it professional development at whatever segment of a individual's professional journey that might be, and interpreting then actively as a healthcare interpreter. And I don't see it, and as it has shifted over the time, I wouldn't want it to go any less than, probably, and I'm again not in numbers, but maybe a 10 to 15%. I'd at least want to have that much dedicated to interpreting actively, because that's such a key component to then training, debriefing, mentoring. So you're not, first off, it's amazing how quickly, at least for me, the skills can get rusty very quickly, just even over the weekend. Maybe a little bit of an exaggeration there, but to be sharp, not only with keeping the cognitive skills, but reading the situation, keeping all of the terminology, something we maybe take for granted, maybe we don't, but keeping all of that fresh, and it all ends up somehow or another, because I think about it through a training brain, informing then my training processes. So I enjoy story. Story, I think, is a very powerful way to communicate, not only messages, but I mean, it's what we're created of, my opinion. We're all just a bunch of walking stories, right? So I'll be able to, in a training session, share, we're maybe talking about some ethics thing, right? And so I'll be able to share, which reminds me of something that just happened yesterday, and then put the, instead of just a very dry, dare I say, discussion on ethics within the context of how this is, letting people kind of immerse in the story of how things are unfolding in real events, in recent experience. And it keeps not only the training fresh and interesting, hopefully, for people who are training with me, but also relevant and and real-time learning experiences. So the having both aspects of actively training, working with different aspects of professional development, and actively interpreting is key. I don't think I would want it any other way.
And it makes complete sense to me as well, because of what you say about feeling like you're keeping, in a way, a pulse on what is current by you directly being immersed in the experience of doing it and practicing it as a professional yourself. So it takes it all to a different level the moment you're then engaging in any kind of development with fellow practitioners or people to become practitioners. So I can agree with that completely, and I could see the value of it tremendously. So.
And it is just so darn rewarding.
Well,
and that's, the skill that you have developed, as a professional, to keep actively engaged in that is important. So in a selfish sort of way, if that's possible.
No, I mean, I think it is not possible, because what are you actually doing? You're giving voice. I mean, exactly. That's the most selfless thing I could think of. And there are probably a couple of others out there, but I think it's right there up there with the best of the best selfless things that one as a human being can be engaging in, giving voice. So,
and having an opportunity to grow and guide and mentor others into that same professional experience is just I struggle to come up with the right word. Rewarding just doesn't quite seem to cut it, but I'll stick with that word.
So let me switch a little bit here. I mean, it is the holiday season. It so happens we are heading into 2023. As you take a moment to ponder that, is there anything in particular that you feel you'd like to, say, verbalize, share with this audience at this time?
Oh gosh, yes, it's that time of year to reflect on things, set goals for the new year, New Year's resolutions, all of that good stuff. And let me just put a big old asterisk right here to say, you don't need the changing of a calendar to set goals and evaluate and assess and reflect. And I say that looking into the mirror because sometimes dates come and go. And then, oh, shoot, I missed the opportunity. And now I have to wait until next year to.
Does that ever really happen? Because I just put it on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it's just, okay, next week, starting today, this is what I'm going to do differently. Doesn't always work out that way.
But at least it's something, right? So I guess I would say at this changing of the calendar years, it still does present itself with an opportunity to take a moment and think about, what do I have in store for 2023 as best as we can, predict or plan for, and, be ready to adjust to whatever comes. But in order for us to kind of think into the new year, to stop and take a moment and appreciate the progress, whether it was intentional progress or progress that just kind of happened to spring up because things came up. And I look at how I responded to different challenges or unexpected things in personal and professional life, or opportunities that I had to grow in different skill sets. So really, I would encourage folks to take a moment to reflect on where they've come and over the past year, or whatever time frame you'd like to you certainly reflect on, and looking into the new year, set some plans to think, these are areas that I'd like to grow into. If that's kind of the thing that you like to do, is to set goals. But I'm also this is maybe going to sound terrible. Nobody's going to watch this recording, right? This is just us. We're not recording here.
No,
But
we're
why
not
bother?
recording.
Yeah, nobody. Yeah, no.
This is Erin. I'm curious about what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because you're right. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, setting goals and having time frames, and then, the fiasco hits when it doesn't happen. And so there is a lot to be said. Some people say, I don't set goals. I just live each day and do the best that I can for that day. Every day is an opportunity. But I'm wondering about Erin.
So I'm specifically looking forward to, yes, being open to the journey and exploring. That's something that I want to grow into in 2023. So I don't have any big, goals, or I want to make sure to accomplish this, or, produce this or other specific things professionally or personally, but rather to take this time, especially, so to kind of weave us back to where we started our conversation. I haven't really stepped away from anything in a formal capacity in quite a long time. I've continued to be active in different things and continued that activity in those different areas. So that's what I'm looking forward to in 2023, is to be more ready to take on new adventures, to take on new experiences from an exploratory standpoint, and see what that brings.
So are you going to become a patisserie chef or something like that?
Ooh, that sounds wonderful.
I'm just thinking holiday pastries right now. I think I have it on the brain. I don't know what's going on,
I
but
think that would be wonderful. A little known fact about myself: I think I have more cookbooks and recipes and whatnot collections than any other type of genre. So you might be onto something there.
well, I mean, they're great to read, actually. I started out being a quote unquote experimental baker, so I never do the recipe the way it's laid out. I always start out, okay, this is the premise. These are the proportions. What can I take and shift and because it is about proportions, but adapting to something else and making it into something that is even better. So, or at least different from that. I love the idea of new adventure, new opportunities that you haven't considered before because you haven't necessarily had the time to even do that. Now that you have this huge hole of a gap of space and time because you're no longer on the commission, that doesn't mean that you don't have tons of other stuff, but there's a little bit of un huequito, a little space opening up in a way that sounds like a wonderful place to be in 2023 for you to engage in other.
It really is. It really is. So I look forward to sharing back on when we get to the close of 2023.
Are you inviting yourself back to my interview session? I would love that, by the way.
I wasn't being too subtle then, right? Good. Okay. You picked up on that. Perfect.
I would absolutely love that. In fact, I love to do check-ins with people, especially my favorite people. So.
Oh gosh, I would love it. So,
no, that would be great. I'm curious to see what 2023 brings for you, Erin, and knowing more about what you had.
This I can be quite certain of. It will definitely involve a community of people. That's just been the story and the theme throughout. So, the appreciating that even though the work that an interpreter does is solo work for the most part, especially in healthcare, we're still members of a broader community and engaged with all the people around us. So I just want to wrap y'all up in a big virtual hug.
I'm taking it. I'm feeling it. And I want to thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today and
well, thank you
a
for
little
having
bit
me.
of Erin. Yes,
yeah.
of course. And I look forward to being in touch, being in that community spirit, as you say. And you know how to get a hold of me. So if anything comes up, absolutely, just a text away.
Sounds good. You can count on it.
Okay. Wonderful.
Right. Yep.
So goodbye, everybody. And thank you again, Erin, for being here. Commissioner Emeritus.
Thank you so much.
You bet.